kariki ki te atua. Ko ia te timatanga hui te whakamutu.
Ko taino I te waka, ko puki one me tū au wharepapa ngā maunga.
I ako nui, I ako rahi, tēnā koutou katoa. E tū ana au, I raro i te maru o kahuroa, tū mai, ngā awa, e rere, e rere, e rere. Ka mihi ake ki a koutou, I runga I te āhuatanga o tēnei wā. No te tai tokirau tēnei, engari I tūpu ake au I motueka. Nō reira, me mihi ki te honga kāinga, ngā iwi takitaki o te Tauihu, tēnā koutou. Kei ngā pai kōrero mō tēnei rangi. Kei te mihi atu, nā koutou mātou whakahōnore. Koutou anō hoki, ngā koro mātua, ngā rangatira, me ngā kākā wahanui o te hapori, tēnā koutou. Ka ti, kua whakaraui ka tātou I runga I te karanga o te Tauihu, te karanga whenua, te karanga moana, te karanga tāngata. Nō reira, ka whakapau kaha ana au I te kaupapa o te Tauihu. Kōrero kei runga, raru kei raro. Mā tātou katoa, te huarahi, tika e whai ana. Mā whero, mā panga, ka oti ai te mahi. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora everyone, and welcome along to this evening's Te Tauihu Talks on Courageous Leadership. We must have struck a chord here because this event was fully booked well over a week ago. It was a bit of a test for us coming up with 6 different topics that we wanted to take to the communities around Te Tauihu, from Mohua Golden Bay to Waikawa Picton, to have conversations both here in this room, but also via the live stream and the social media that we've got going as well. So I'd like to extend the welcome tonight that I just gave also to everyone who's joining us on the live stream. And for those of you here, you're not yet off the hook either. So I know you've come along and enjoyed free wine and beer tonight and some cheese. But there's one thing you can do to contribute and bring your part, and that is that you've all decided to attend because you've seen the pānui that have been circulated. But there are a number of people that we would like to share this event with tonight. So whilst in this environment normally we'd ask you to turn your phones off and keep them away, tonight I'm going to ask you to get your phone out. And if you've registered for the event tonight, then we've sent you an email. It should be from Te Tauihu Talks. In that email is the link to 2 live streams. One is the one we're running through the Facebook page, and the second is the Vimeo link. You can click on either of those to participate and share the live stream with your friends and whānau, and we would really appreciate if you could do that. By the end of the night in Nelson, we had over 2,000 people had participated in the live stream, and in the video content that we've been circulating as part of this series, we've had over 10,000 people view that, which I felt pretty good about until Paul Morgan spoke earlier and told me that his benchmark is 50,000 views, and that apparently we're lagging behind. And so, so you can help me out tonight by sharing it and circulating this far and wide. If you are having trouble accessing the live stream, then you are also welcome to in terms of asking questions. The format for tonight is that we'll have a facilitated conversation for the first half of the evening with our fantastic lineup of panellists, but the second half of the evening we currently have no questions. And so all of those questions and the whole agenda for the second half will be built based on your feedback and your questions. To submit those for the second half, you can do that through the Facebook live stream or through Vimeo, or if you're struggling to access either of those, then the email that we sent you with regards to this event or that we've just sent you, you can just hit reply to, and Libby is patiently collating everyone's questions and inserting them into our run sheet for the second half. So please do, as things come up for you, ask questions and we will get them answered in the second half. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our fantastic panel this evening. So first up, I'd like to introduce Kerensa Johnston. So Kerensa has been the Chief Executive of Wakatu Incorporation since 2016. She joined Wakatu as General Counsel in 2012. She is a lawyer who has worked as a solicitor in the private sector, a legal academic in the Faculty of Law, University of Auckland, where she specialised in Māori legal development, public law and land law, and as a barrister. Kerensa is a graduate of Victoria University, where she has been awarded an LLB and a BA in history. She has a Master of Laws in International Law, First Class Honours from the University of Auckland. She is the Chair of Ngā Pai o Te Maramatanga, the Māori Centre of Research Excellence, and she is a member of the International Association of Corporate Counsel, Corporate Lawyers New Zealand, and Te Hungaroia, the Māori Law Society. Nau mai, haere mai, Kerensa. Next up, it's my pleasure to welcome Ali Boswijk. Ali has lived in Nelson for 23 years, and during that time she has worked in both the public and private sector. A communications specialist with over 30 years' experience, Ali has started her working career with the London-based international news agency WTN. Since then, she has worked with a wide range of organisations from large international blue-chip companies and startups to governments and NGOs. In recent years, she has moved increasingly into positions of strategy development and taken on a number of governance roles. The most significant of these, as I'm sure many of you will be aware, was as a councillor with Nelson City Council and in the second term as Deputy Mayor. From 2012, she worked on international projects for World of Wearable Arts and in recent years held the position of Head of International Projects and Business Development. Recently, Ali was appointed the CEO of the Nelson Tasman Chamber of Commerce, one of the most exciting emails I received this year, I have to say, Ali. I was stoked to see that, where she'll be working to promote and advocate for all businesses in the Nelson Tasman region. She is a trustee of the Nelson Arts Festival and Makeshift Spaces Trust, a co-owner of Old St John's, former church and now community and venue space. And as a partner in the Free House, she knows a thing or two about craft beer. So welcome, Ali. Right, and last but certainly not least, we are very fortunate to be welcoming Zoe Palmer. Zoe has spent her high school years heavily involved in people-powered projects such as running a campaign for better mental health services, volunteering at Whanake Youth with the planning and implementation of a youth space in Stoke, and serving on the Nelson Youth Council and other smaller groups such as the DHB Youth Advisory Panel. And I think many of you may recall the campaign that Zoe ran last year to save the youth mental health services here in Nelson Tasman, and was very successful in gaining a lot of political support right across the spectrum to take that fight to government. Zoe now works as an employment consultant for Employable, working with people with disabilities to find sustained, meaningful employment in Te Tauihu. As well as this, she is a committee member in the Nelson Jazz Club, plays the saxophone in the Nelson Big Band, and is part of the Top of the South Youth Sector Oversight Group. She's also recently joined forces with Joni Tomset to create a community initiative called Our Village. And in her spare time, in brackets here it has laugh my ass off, you can find her hanging out with her two horses, helping plan the Nelson Jazz Festival and getting amongst Te Tauihu's beautiful national parks. Welcome, Zoe. Excellent. Right, with the introductions done, we're now going to kick off the first part of the conversation. So as I said, if anything resonates for you during the talks tonight, and you would like to participate and ask the panel or any of the particular panellists a question, then please do go to your inbox now, pick out the email we sent you, reply to and ask those questions. You need to ask them in the first half for them to be answered in the second half, so please do participate. So the first part of the evening, we're going to be having one-on-one conversations to get to know our panellists better and get to know their insights around courageous leadership. And we're going to start with you, Kerensa. So I've got a question for you to kick off, and I know that's something that's very much on everyone's mind at the moment. And as we've been travelling around Te Tauihu, visiting communities and holding hui to try and understand what the issues are on the ground, this is something that's come through very strongly. So we're facing a lot of big issues. What sort of leaders do you think we need right now?
I think we're hearing at the moment, in terms of leadership, we talk a lot about kindness. And we see that with our own leaders nationally, particularly our Prime Minister talks about kindness a lot. I think kindness is important, but I think actually courage is what's required in our leadership at present. And kindness certainly has its place in a leader, but the kind of issues that we're facing really require people who are courageous, who are able to see a very long-term perspective, and I think we will be talking about that, some of the challenges around taking that approach in our current structure. But for me, I think the overwhelming quality that I admire in a leader is courage and the willingness to make really difficult and sometimes unpopular decisions. But they do so because they realise that that's what's required at the particular moment in time.
So in your assessment of our current sort of political landscape and the leadership we have just here in Te Tauihu and wider Aotearoa context, do you think we are being courageous enough in making those bold decisions?
No. No, I don't. I mean, if we talk first about our political landscape nationally and globally, we're not being courageous enough, and partly that's driven by the very short-term nature of the thinking that we are seeing. So that's what I would say politically. I don't think that's true of our community and some of the leadership that we see here, particularly in our own community and in, not so much in private spheres, but away from that national or global landscape. I think the nature of the leadership is quite different. But I think politically, leadership is not courageous enough, and I think we have to think as communities how we can influence that conversation so that we can see some change. And so I think individually, perhaps, and as communities, and partly this is the benefit of these sorts of conversations, we need to be thinking about the real power and ability we have to influence the changes that are needed.
Awesome. And so thinking about that, having political influence and having our say and getting the right sort of level of investment and attention to the big issues that we're facing, focusing on business for a moment. You're the leader of a very large company, a very significant company here in Te Tauihu, and what's required of our businesses right now in terms of responding to those challenges is quite significant, particularly in the environmental space. So how confident are you, and what examples are you seeing in the business community where people are stepping up?
It depends on which, when we talk about business, I think it's important to remember that businesses or companies are just collections of people, at their heart. So when I think about our collection of businesses within Wakatū, we're an organisation, as Mariana has said, a family business. And any business is really just the sum of the people who make up that organisation, its particular culture, the values that underpin how it does things. Now, the beauty, I think, of businesses is that they have this ability to influence how their people behave, the activities they undertake, the resources that they control. If they are profitable, which hopefully they are, they have to be if they want to be there in the longer term, then they also have important decisions to make about how they use that profit. So I think business has a huge opportunity to really grapple with the issues that are right in front of us in terms of climate change, how we treat people, how we pay people, all of the things that are within our control.
Awesome. And thinking about the role of Wakatū in that process from your point of view, Wakatū talk a lot about kaitiakitanga, and I guess for the benefit of the audience and thinking about people who aren't connected to Wakatū directly, what does that mean to Wakatū, and what role do you see Wakatū playing?
Yeah, kaitiakitanga is a really interesting concept or value that's been getting a lot of attention, I think, across our country in the last few years, and you're seeing lots of businesses are picking up this concept of kaitiakitanga and working with it. I think from our perspective, from a Māori perspective, kaitiakitanga is one of many concepts or values that make up our view of the world. So it's not a concept that should be seen in isolation. I mean, in its purest form, if we want to kind of translate it, it's often also translated as guardianship or stewardship of the environment. That's a very limited view of what the word means from a Māori perspective. You can't really understand kaitiakitanga without thinking about other concepts within the Māori world. So manaakitanga is one, which is the spirit of generosity or hospitality. But actually, manaakitanga is a word which refers to how one demonstrates their mana to another, whether that's an individual or a collective. And of course, other concepts like rangatiratanga that Barney was talking about in his introduction. So concepts of authority and control. So kaitiakitanga is quite a deep, complex value that talks not just about care and love of our environment, but also use of our resources in a very sustainable way. So we're always quite careful, I think, in terms of using that term and using it really wisely and deliberately.
And that's certainly been a theme of some of the conversations we've been having as part of that strategy, is getting past the lip service that often values are associated with. And like you say, some of these values have been picked up by a lot of people, but what does that mean in terms of action? And I guess that's a nice segue into something that I want to ask you, which is, we can only control so much here in Te Tauihu, but looking at issues around te tiriti and here locally, thinking about a leadership model and how we make decisions here in Te Tauihu, how can we do better at honouring the treaty?
Johnny's bringing out all the easy questions all at the beginning. If we just take a step back, I guess, in terms of how I think about the treaty, and it's really lovely, Johnny, to hear you use te tiriti, because people forget that there's the English text, there's the Māori text. It was the Māori text that was signed by over 500 people. The English text was signed by around about 30 people. So it's the Māori text that I always go to when I think of the treaty. And I think it's a very beautiful blueprint or framework that sets the tone, or set the tone for how we were to develop as a country. But it's not something that can be seen in isolation. The treaty sits alongside all of our other really important human rights documents, our international laws, our constitutions. And New Zealand, of course, doesn't have a written constitution. We have an unwritten constitution, so we're a bit like magpies. We pull from all these different parts. And for me, the treaty is also not about just about the relationship between Māori and the Crown. The treaty provides that framework for all of us, whether we're born in New Zealand or whether we choose to make this place our home. So I always feel hugely proud of that document and its potential. And the issue is its potential has not been realised yet. But I believe it will be in our time. I'm very hopeful about that. And I think what it requires is for people to grapple with, in particular, our history, try and understand it, have these sorts of conversations about what it means to be a New Zealander and how actually we're reflections of each other in this beautiful place that we all find ourselves in.
Awesome. All right, great place to leave it, and we'll move on to you now, Ellie. So, Ellie, you've been involved in a number of different areas. You've worked across local politics, in the public sector, and in business, both as a business owner and now with the Chamber of Commerce. What are some of the examples that have inspired you around courageous leadership in that time?
Oh, there's a whole list of them probably. I think it's probably, to pick out individuals would be quite difficult, but I think it is probably a little bit, as Kerensa said, it's actually about those people that step up when they need to. That's what is really inspiring, when you're actually in a situation where the decision that you've got to make is probably not the best decision, but actually you have to make it anyway. And I think that that's something that's quite interesting to learn from and to watch. I think local government is very different to business. The decisions you make in a local government environment are quite different because you've got a very different motivation. That's not to say that the decision-making process isn't sometimes similar. It sounds a bit odd, but actually the purpose for the decision is quite different. So if I'm thinking about the local government context, the ramifications of your decision are so far-reaching. So the responsibility of that decision is far greater often than in a business sense. I think in terms of a business-based decision, again, I totally agree. A business is basically a group of people. That's what a business is. It's not an entity of its own that makes its own decision. That doesn't happen. The decisions are made by the people within that organisation. But I think that's the difference to me, I guess. Within local government, it's about realising that the decision you make has got that huge impact potentially. And so then watching people who can make those decisions with certainty it's quite awe-inspiring. And I think that's a large part of it. If you can actually get to a point where you know that you have everything in front of you to make the decision that you need to make, that is absolutely vital. So in terms of the leadership role in that space, it's also about the people around you supporting you to make sure that you've got that information. In a business context, it's often more instinctive, I think. It's responsive to a market, and there'll be all sorts of information that you're dealing with. But often, particularly if it's your own business or a small business, which is a lot of the people that I deal with, they're doing it purely based on gut at that point, and it's purely the instinct behind it. So the decision is quite a different way that they make it. And often it's a difficult decision because although a community might not depend on it, their house might depend on that decision or something else that they've leveraged against that whole idea of what that business could be. So there's a huge amount of emotion caught up with that sometimes. And it's really powerful. If you watch people making decisions in those situations, they make the right decision. That's fantastic.
So you talk about the ability to think quickly and make the right decision in those environments when you're under pressure. Paul, Miriana and I had a very interesting WeChat conversation last night. Typically when I'm trying to relax in the evenings at the moment, Paul chimes into my inbox with something challenging for us to contend with. And last night we had a very interesting discussion about people in positions of influence, and when people get to certain positions, how often we see that they tend to shut up once they're there, right? So you might have a strongly held view, you're passionate about particular issues, and then get put in positions where, for whatever reason, you're constrained by that position. You're now the Chamber of Commerce CEO. You've been in a number of positions, in local government and business as well. How do we deal with that? And is that a true reflection? Do you agree with that?
I rarely shut up, so I'm not it's not something that naturally comes to me.
Yeah, well, that's obviously why Paul was confused as well.
I know what he's saying, though. I do understand. But I think it's true. I think that people get to a certain point. And I actually think people also, no matter how influential they may be and how people perceive them to be somebody who's very secure in what they believe, people often who are in those positions of leadership are there because they think about everything and they second-guess themselves. So I do think that's part of it as well. And I think that, but also as somebody in that position who has got there, also will be wanting to look for other people to be involved in that decision-making, because leadership is, decision-making in that context is also about taking advice and information from the people around you. Being a leader is not necessarily being in charge. And that's quite a difference for me, I think. So I think it's actually how you give people space to have input into that. It may well be, and you would hope that at some point then you could come in and actually, take control again. But as I say, it's not something that... I understand what he's saying, and I understand where he's coming from. And it can be frustrating, I think, because if you see people who have got really good ideas and they really know what they're talking about, and then they don't actually come forward with that. But I think that it's possibly because they're waiting for that other input to help them advise them in that way.
That makes sense. So I want to focus in on business for a minute then, around that, because what we're really talking about there with leadership is creating the right conditions to allow for the courageous leadership we're looking for, right? So in a New Zealand business context, we had a very interesting conversation a couple of months ago at the Free House with regards to...
Johnny.
You remember. It's all right. It was first pint conversation about. It was really about the way we set up businesses in New Zealand, and thinking about this very narrow definition of the idea that all a business should do is produce a profit, and the types of decisions and behaviours that that's led to. What's your view on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that businesses, if people just get up in the morning to make money and then that's their pure motivation, they won't last. I think that, and actually I think that there are very few businesses where that is purely their motivation. But the ones that do, and that they're cynical and they see an opportunity and they just move in to cream the market, they disappear. The businesses that have some kind of, not some kind, but have got a broader view in terms of what they're trying to achieve. People want to be the best at what they do. And typically I see with the businesses that I deal with, they want to have the best cafe, they want to make the best product, they want to have their staff engage with what they're doing. So businesses that operate in that way and come from that sense of actually engaging with the people within the organisation are the ones that will actually be successful, because we're naturally attracted to that. And it's a little bit like being nice. But there's more depth to the idea of people being nice than just being nice. It's actually the idea that people show those traits that you want to engage with because they're actually interested in what you're doing. They're interested in their employees. They'll engage with them in a way that actually isn't just about saying, you've only worked 8 hours a day, you should be working 10, and I need to pay you this much money. What have you produced? That business model doesn't succeed. So in terms of I've got a bit of a thing about this idea of when people talk about businesses that have got some kind of a social motivation. So if they are working in social enterprise, all business is a social enterprise. That's what it is. All business actually is social in what it does. It produces something for society. It employs people in some way that benefits those people. It trains them. So to actually separate it out, I think puts it in a place where people suddenly see it as something a little bit different, a little bit thing that they can't connect with and engage with. But actually, if you look at what businesses do generally, they engage in social enterprise in one way or another. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, it's a really, really good point. And so I guess, we often see businesses take this approach of the whole concept of giving back. And too often I think that giving back comes once a business is financially successful rather than it kind of being in the DNA of the business from the outset around that contribution. So I guess thinking about Te Tauihu, our business community, in terms of the challenges we face around inequality, climate change, sustainability issues, how do we engage better with businesses and lift businesses up to play a better role in that? And how do we make it from the outset rather than as an afterthought?
And I think it's actually in part with projects like this, because actually businesses do want to do those things. And the people within it will force that change as well, because they want to be involved and working in a way that fulfills them beyond just the pay packet at the end of the month. And it's quite interesting to me, having been around for quite a long time. In 1992, after the Rio Earth Summit, the United Nations actually set up a whole series of challenges for the planet to try and achieve these millennial goals based around equity, reduction of environmental impact. And it was amazing at that time how many businesses really bought into that and how many companies internationally did. And what we're seeing now, I guess, is the next iteration of that, where people sort of saw it at a level where you say it's like giving back kind of when you've become successful, as opposed to now people are realizing, to be honest, it'll be partly consumer-led as well, because actually people will want to engage with those businesses that they know are behaving in the right way. So that's a very strong way to motivate businesses to actually to change the way that they behave. I'm not saying it's about holding people to ransom, but it wouldn't just naturally become a part of the way that we assess. We know brand loyalty is becoming increasingly less and less. We know that the generation below ours, 2 below mine, possibly 3 below mine now, are really not interested in actually the brand itself. They're interested in actually connecting with the people behind what they're doing. And you see that increasingly in the way that companies raise money, in the way that companies operate. So I do think that actually there'll be a consumer push as well to ensure that companies do the right thing. But the main thing that I have absolutely seen in the last all of 4.5, 5 months is that businesses do want to do the right thing. So it's providing the opportunity to make that happen. And I think that's the challenge. That's the hard bit, because you've got the willingness, and we know where we want to get. It's what you do in the middle to get people there.
And like we reflected on in our panel over in Waido, it stuck with me. Jan Hani has said we can only move as fast as trust allows.
Yeah,
right? And that's
exactly
what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Excellent. So I want to talk to Zoe now. Thanks so much for being with us, Zoe. So I'm really interested in what you did last year. I remember seeing the campaign come about and being very inspired by it. So what motivated you to take on that challenge?
Well, I heard a poem by a guy called Neil Hilborn. He's a slam poet, and the poem's called Joey. I don't know if any of you guys have heard it. But basically it talks about how he and his friend were both going through mental health challenges, and Joey's parents didn't have money, didn't have anything, and Neil talks about how his parents had the money to pay for $75 sessions an hour, and that his mum paid for countless $75 sessions an hour until he felt okay again, and Joey didn't have that, and Joey died, pretty much. And that poem really, really stuck with me. And then when I heard about changes to the public system, having been through the public system for a long time now, that really resonated with me, because I think as a nation, especially at the time, election promises were that mental health services were going to be improving. So when I heard that, it didn't sit right with me that we were going to increase the amount of Joeys that were out there without access to specialist services after hours. So.
Wow. And so you took on this campaign as an 18-year-old?
Yes.
Yeah. And you were still in school, right, at that point that you took on the campaign. And you managed to get support right across the political spectrum for what you were doing. And you were heard by the government, so you got through the right channels. What did you learn from that experience that might be of benefit to other people thinking of taking on similar fights?
Ooh. All right, hold on, guys. I'm not stupid. I'm just panicking a little bit. What advice would I give? I think for anyone wanting to start something, I think community and drawing together a community is the main thing. And I think right from the get-go, what I did was, first of all, I started with a survey to make sure that other people kind of agreed with me before I launched into this massive thing. And I think being able to pull people together like that is how something like a campaign like that would work. I think there are things that you can't do on your own, and a massive campaign and massive change is one. And I mean, if you link it back to other changes and other campaigns happening around the region, around climate change, around health and well-being and stuff, it takes a whole community to get behind it. So I think using the technology that we have at the moment, social media, all kinds of different things to pull people in behind you is probably the advice I would give.
Awesome. And, you would have been, it was noticed that, you were a young person leading a fairly significant campaign. There's been a lot of discussion through this process about engaging with young people. A lot of people discuss that at the moment around decision-making and leadership. I often wonder whether the leadership challenges have got too hard and people are ready to just delegate it on to young people, and that's why everyone's talking about it. What's your view on what we need to do right now in terms of future decision-making to engage young people?
That's a good question. I think that we are beyond the stage of being able to hide behind ignorance. We have the science now for changes that are happening. We have the technology to be able to really make change. So I think the only thing that's keeping us from making Tauihu or the world better is ourselves, it's people. And I think that's where courageous leadership comes in. For me, courageous leadership means leadership, but with that aspect of courage, which is kind of linked to bravery, which is sort of a hand-me-down suit from terrified as hell, and the reason that it's terrifying as hell is because it's unknown. But I think what we do know is what's going to happen if we don't make these kinds of changes. And I think pulling young people into these decisions is good, but I think we can't put everything on the young people, because I mean, I'm fresh out of school. The knowledge that you two have, the knowledge that you people in this room have, is all valuable. You can be 80 and you have the wisdom of a whole life behind you, and you can be my age and kind of sassy and throwing caution into the wind and, well, we're people, we got ourselves in this situation, why can't we just get ourselves out? And I think it's a collective approach. It's not just saying to my generation, oh, you guys are the ones that are going to have to deal with this, I feel so sorry for you. Because when I hear that, I get a little bit mad, because I'm like, actually, you guys are still alive. And and you have degrees in this kind of shit, So I think pulling young people in is important, but I think it's all of us. It's a village.
Yeah, awesome. And so you also, as part of that and lifting young people up, you talk about your passion for, and I read an article in the Nelson Mail where you said, helping people has helped me. What did you mean by that?
I can't tell if I said that on one of those days where I was just feeling a little bit too honest. I might have. But I think part of it stems from some kind of wanting to help people and having friends that I've gone through the mental health system with and seeing their plight and all that kind of stuff. And it helps me in a way that if I don't know, I go back to that if not you, then who thing. And even that think globally, act locally, take personal responsibility, whatever it is. But it's just like all of us, if we're in a position to do something, I don't understand why people don't, because there are people that need helping and people that need advocates and all of that kind of thing. So I guess trying to help and doing my bit helps me to know that I have at least tried, I think.
Awesome. And, thinking about that now and looking at this conversation around having an intergenerational vision for Te Tauihu, taking stock of our current state and building a roadmap for the future. I guess I want to ask you, what's your vision? What do you see for the future of Te Tauihu? What would you like to change and create in this area?
Oh, so much. So, I mean, I love Te Tauihu. That's why I live here. The national parks, the whenua here, the people here. Everyone here has this sort of hahana or a spark or something like that that just makes this community really, really special, I think. But what I would like to change is I would like to see us reprioritize a little bit. You know, we have this, we talk about a linear economy, and that was in a previous talk I went to, and a lot of businesses operate on a linear economy, or it's growth driven, and the word growth comes up so often. But what would happen if we changed our KPI to resilience or quality of life or something like that? And I think the scope to do that in Te Tauihu, because of the people that I mentioned, it's doable. So my vision for Te Tauihu is to stop hiding behind ignorance, start changing, be courageous leaders, and I think we need to work on things like higher density housing and all of the topics that we talk about, and we've declared a climate emergency, or Nelson has at least. Where's the doughy after the hui? You know, I think we're in a position where we can actually start tangibly doing some of that, and I think it's just a matter of taking that leap.
Awesome, great. And if part of that leap involved a Te Tauihu council, would you consider running for mayor? I think you've got a lot of support. Look, guys, we are going to leave this part of the conversation there, and what we really want now is to have a quick break to recharge your glasses, but also the opportunity, more importantly, for you to submit your questions. So we've had a really inspiring dialogue. Thank you to our panellists for bringing that challenge to us right now. And whatever is sparked for you, now's the time to submit that question by replying to the email we sent you as part of the registration, or by jumping on the Facebook page. We will get to your questions, and the whole second half is audience developed. So please recharge your glasses, go to the bathroom, and we'll be back in 5 minutes. Thank you. All right, we're going to get underway again. So if you'd like to grab your drinks and take a seat. All right, thank you everyone, and I hope you enjoyed the conversations happening in the breaks. We've had a lot of questions, which is great, so hopefully we get through them all. And thank you to everyone on the live stream who's participating, both from around Te Tauihu, but also people connected to Te Tauihu who are participating from overseas. We've had quite a lot of feedback from people who are travelling overseas or living overseas who are participating in the live streams, which is pretty awesome to be having a local conversation that we need to have right now, where people from all around the world who are connected to this place can participate. So thank you to everyone who is involved. I'm going to start with a question from Ashley Mooney, who's actually here with us tonight, and it's about local decision making. Any of the panellists are welcome to answer. So, are there areas where regional bodies will need central government legislation to empower them to deliver this project? Do we need more localised decision making?
Yes. I'll answer that, shall I, initially? Absolutely. So the question was, sorry, whether or not we need central government
central government legislation to enable that local decision making.
Absolutely, I think we do. I think that the local decision making can only be made locally. That's the nature of it, and only locals know their locality, and understand the tensions. And I think that one of the hardest things for local government often are the constraints that are put out by central government in terms of regulations that they have to follow. And one of the things that came out of a number of workshops that I went to as part of this was the fact that there are rules and regulations in place that actually do not deliver what we now need to be delivered, whether that's as simple as the Food Act not allowing you to go and give food to the man shelter at the end of an event because actually it hasn't come from an authorised source, which is ridiculous, right through to how you actually invest in some kind of business where if you want to have some kind of capital investment, what that looks like, the time, the process involved, that doesn't necessarily reflect what you need it to do. So in order to be able to free that up, you have to have local decision making that allows that. But the local decision making on the other side of that has to be done in a way that actually people trust. So I think that it goes two ways, because I do think that there's a certain responsibility with local decision making that has to be taken into account.
Right.
And perhaps there's a risk, I think, too. If local decision making, local leadership is not courageous enough, then those decisions will be made for us at the central level. So if you think about particularly the issues we're facing with water, with climate change, if we don't, as a region, make some decisions about how we would like to confront those issues, those decisions will be made for us. And in fact, they are being made for us as we speak.
Absolutely. So a good segue into the question from Julie. Julie said, what are the different ways would you like courageous leadership to be a part of the upcoming local elections?
In what way? It's a tricky. It's quite a difficult. The issue there is a structural one again, and the short-term nature of the cycle, and it's very hard to expect the people in those positions to act courageously and with a long-term view because of the short-term nature of their appointment, essentially. So they're there for a very short time. They're trying, if they're people who, and I believe most of them are there with all the best intentions, but hamstrung in terms of what is achievable within a very short-term time frame, and always thinking about the next election. So I think we actually need a radical rethink of the structure of our local bodies and our national political system.
So the current structure is not fit for purpose. Ali, you've been there with local government, elections are coming up. Do you encourage people to stand?
I encourage people to stand, but I totally agree. I think that 3 years, actually, if we're thinking of an intergenerational approach, and we're thinking way into the future, if we're totally hidebound by a 3-year cycle, whereby it's so formulaic in the way that people, you respond, there are processes in place, there are consultations in place. So even if you get into council with the best and you're the most courageous leader in the world that wants to do something amazing and actually say, okay, tomorrow the dump is going to be closed. We're not going to have any more rubbish collection. How do we deal with that? To actually make that a reality will take a long time under the current structure. So I think that actually there will be some courageous people who do stand for, I think everyone who stands for council is courageous, to be honest. You're putting yourself in a pretty, difficult position a lot of the time, and it's not exactly the easiest of jobs, but actually the structure doesn't allow them to be as courageous as they could be.
I just would like to jump in on that with maybe a bit more of a shallow viewpoint. I'm not sure. But do you guys ever remember doing that thing in primary school where you do a test and you find out what kind of animal you are? And there's a lion, a beaver, a golden retriever, and like a monkey or something. And like the lion kids were like the ones that got picked to go on the leadership camps, and the other ones were told, all right, you guys aren't the leaders. The golden retrievers, you guys are the happy-go-lucky dewy ones, and the beavers, you guys are like the heads down working ones. And I think that mindset carries on to us through adulthood. And I think one of the things about courageous leadership in local body elections is it's not just about standing for council or running. It can be about getting out and just voting. And I think it's the people that can change those systems that you guys were talking about. So the people created those systems, and people can therefore change those systems. Yeah. So by all of us having a collective input, the beavers, the golden retrievers, the lions, the cats, whatever, I think it's actually really important that we all get out and vote, and we all hold our leaders accountable. Even if we're not sitting around the council table, we can still be courageous leaders in our local electorates.
Yeah. Awesome. I mean, so I think, Zoe, that's such an important point that Zoe makes. We have this attitude sometimes that things are fixed and they are the way they are, and they will always be this way. But actually, we've created these things, and we can change them.
Also, and there's a relevant question to that as well. So, and you've touched on it already, Ellie, which is sometimes being in those positions is actually really challenging as well. So we talk about holding our leaders to account, but it's not easy to stand. It's not easy to be a leader in that position, especially with the constraints. So there's a question here from Amanda saying leaders of both big and small organisations are often called upon to make difficult decisions or even carry out decisions they haven't made. Those decisions affect people of Te Tauihu. This can be in a financial way or perhaps a change of status, but they also impact our emotional, environmental and social relationships. So what practical steps as a courageous leader can we take to lessen the impact on our people, and how do we make tough business choices while supporting people? It's a big question.
So there's a thesis in that somewhere. I mean, I think one of the main things that for me would be it's about actually always informing people what's going on. I think the worst thing at all, I think the worst kind of leadership is, I mean, it's an old sort of analogy, but basically where you tell people what's going to happen, you keep them in the dark, and you just basically, there's I won't say that now because we're streaming, but there's something you throw on them, which isn't lovely. But I think in a situation like that, it's about always informing people and letting them know. I think the situation that we face, though, and where we keep getting back to, is the fact that difficult decisions will have to be made. There's no doubt about it. Things will have to stop. People will have to stop doing what they're doing in certain ways. There's no way at the moment, I don't think that we can... We don't want to shy away from that. We need to face that head on. Right. So in terms of the leadership required for that, it's actually about being really clear that that is the case. If you try and soft-code it in some way, you basically do people a disservice. Because we do know that actually in 50 years from now, the landscape is going to look pretty different if we don't do anything about how we're actually treating it. So you need to be very clear and very open with people that that's the situation. The converse to that is about actually not making people so petrified they can't move. Because that's the worst thing, because then nobody will do anything, they'll be paralysed by the situation. So actually it's about saying, what are the opportunities that come out of that and how do we deal with it? And that's where the leadership role comes in, because you have to be able to take advice and you have to be able to rise above, I guess, what is the emotion around it, to see actually what the the pathway is through it. And that's about being open as much as anything.
Yeah, and honest, right?
Totally honest. You can't be any other thing because you'll be found out pretty quickly.
That's right. And so it's a really interesting because there's a lot of, and we recognise this, so when we first looked at these panels, we considered, do we have a panel on climate change? Do we have a panel on inequality? And the sense was in our project team as we went, the people are hearing this every day. Like you say, they're petrified by these issues. There's a huge amount of anxiety, and we thought, can we talk about courageous leadership and try and get above that? And it's something that encompasses all of those issues. And I guess, I want to put that to the other two panellists, which is, do you think we're quite paralysed by fear at the moment? And is that anxiety stopping us taking action?
I think having just sort of left high school, I took Earth and Space Science, and the teacher, great guy, he told us he has, I can't remember, supplies and stuff for when climate change happens. And I remember sitting there and thinking, you actually have that,
Live stream participation.
You actually are taking it that seriously. And I was thinking, and that was coming from a teacher who was someone kind of in a position of, well, he knows, so he's teaching us. And I think that kind of hit it home for me. And since then, I think and my friends have had quite interesting experiences with climate change anxiety. But on the flip side, I think being paralysed with fear is something that we deal with, and then we have to unparalyze ourselves, otherwise we die. Or in the nature, example, it's the flight or fight, freeze. Sometimes if you freeze, you die. So I think we have to shake ourselves out of that and find a way through connecting with each other to kind of lean on each other and say, actually, we're not too far gone yet. We can still change this. How do we do it? And instead of turning the conversation negative and standing up in schools and preaching about how doomsday is coming, how do we turn that around and actually lean on each other to try and change this before it all happens?
Awesome. And Kerensa, I'll put that to you as well. So there's a lot of anxiety in young people at the moment in particular that's being expressed around issues like climate change. How do you think we shake ourselves out of that and start taking action?
I mean, I agree with Zoe. I think that the wonderful opportunity we have as a region and as a country is that really if we stand back, we're the size nationally of a very small European town, really. We have the capacity, we can call together the leaders of particular industries or academics or government leaders literally into one room and have a conversation about how we're going to grapple with these challenges. So in our whānau, we don't feel, and by whānau I mean our big family, I don't get the sense that we feel paralysed at all, but although we're conscious of the challenge. But I think I personally feel really excited about, as Zoe said, the opportunity it brings for us as New Zealanders to really figure this out. Our challenge will be over the next 100 years that this country may become one of the most attractive places to live from a climatic perspective. It's already a very attractive place to live. And so we may be in a position where our descendants are grappling with millions of people wanting to be in this place. And so how are we going to grapple with that potential change? So, I think we feel really excited about all of the potential that could bring. We took a small delegation to Peru about 3 weeks ago to meet with the indigenous hapu there, really 6 hapu groups who 60% of their glaciers have melted in the last 10 years. So they're facing a situation within probably about 50 years their communities will run out of water. So they're doing all sorts of things around adaptation and figuring out where they're going to move to, what crops they will be growing, And in many ways, they are miles ahead of us in terms of their thinking. They're grappling now with how their families will deal with this issue in the future. And it wasn't scary, and actually it was really inspiring to have that time with them. And one of the things that they are doing, it's similar to what Zoe's saying about it's not too late, is they are really figuring out how to reconnect at a very personal, spiritual level with the land. So how do we, we'll all do this in different ways. It's not just a Māori way of being, but how do we talk to the land and talk to the water, talk to the birds, so that we all of the things that we know within our DNA starts to reactivate. And I think we think that that's a really amazing opportunity we have, particularly as New Zealanders, because we already think like that.
Kia ora.
Awesome. So leading on from that then, in terms of some of the challenges we're facing, Callum's asked, how can leadership inspire a change in the consumerism and throwaway society we live in today while still supporting business? What decisions and by who will cause the biggest changes in the shortest space of time? And he gives the example, businesses waiting until plastic bags were banned to stop using them proves they won't always lead. So do we need constraints as well? I guess is the question. And what do we need?
Oh, why is everyone looking at me? I thought you wanted to answer, Zoe.
Go the other
I
way.
think I can't really talk on a business from the perspective of a business. I mean, I haven't had that life experience yet, which is another argument as to why it's a whole thing, not just for young people to deal with. But I would say that there are some constraints that we can make. I mean, one of the examples that I see at the moment in my own town, I live in Richmond, is the development happening on Lower Queen Street. I mean, the science is out. We know that it's going to be underwater. We know that urban sprawl, like if you look at Tasman, it's mountain there, mountain there, mountain there, flat, fertile land here. So the logic is we put all the houses on the flat, fertile land and we import our food and our growing population. And I sit there and I think to myself, what? Like, whose idea was that? But that's actually happening at the moment. So I'm thinking even like a radical... like a radical change, which is actually quite a logical change we can make, is just to stop rezoning our farmland and start thinking about ways that we can build up, but that we can build up in a way that isn't like failed projects in the Bronx, in those places that you up in urban spaces that work, that have ability for people to connect. I mean, the quarter-acre section Kiwi Dream, that's cancelled now, I think. We all know that. Lawns are cancelled. No more lawns. Just, more gardens, more food producing, especially as our population, as you say, is set to go up. More people living here, desirable place to live. We can't be doing this urban sprawl thing anymore. We need to find ways to let go of our slice of paradise, quarter-acre Kiwi Dream, and look at a new slice of paradise, communal village, eco-friendly dream where we can still grow vegetables, we can still have outdoor space to hang out with our kids, but we do it together and we do it in such a way that we make use of the very finite amount of land we have here. So that's not really a business thing, but that's something that I see that we as a region can be doing and a rule we can be putting in.
Awesome.
Kia ora, Zoe.
There's a question here from Gabriella. She said, do they believe that we could become the poster child for the country and beyond by completely transforming how we live and work, preparing for complete sustainability and independence from the current systems?
Yes.
No, totally.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think we have this opportunity as a region to really lead that because of and Zoe and Ali both talked about it, because of the mindset of the people who are here, this amazing mishmash of talent and people who really care. So absolutely, yes.
Well, I totally agree. I mean, Nelson is a place, the whole Tauihu is a place of such abundance. There is so much food here, there's so much produce here, there's so many amazing things. If you live in the centre of Birmingham, it's not quite so easy to actually access all of these things in a way that we can so easily, because everything is brought in. we've got an incredible opportunity. We've got a very discreet place that actually has got talent. It has got amazing natural attributes, which, if we look after them and actually do more than look after them, but actually feed back into them, then they will continue and grow into the future, and that's what will feed us. And I think, Zoe's comment about planning is absolutely fundamental to this, because actually the way the place grows into the future will totally either support that or completely destroy it. And that's really important, because I think that it's really easy to continue to sprawl. It's an easy way to do it. But the previous question talking about whether or not we need some kind of restraint, yes, we do.
But I think also, we're talking about the, say, local leadership councillors and so on. There's a role for the community to actually support the leaders.
Yeah.
So I think it's easy sometimes when you're not in those positions to be very, critical, and it's important to be critical, but at the same time to support those people who are in those leadership roles with these themes and ideas coming through, because it's very isolating for people who are in those roles most of the time.
Yeah.
And I have to say as well, I think because the conversation is still relatively new for people, there's a certain sense of people feeling unsure about whether or not they actually want to say this out loud.
Right.
Because actually, where we've come from is a place where it hasn't necessarily been spoken, apart from in different groups. Now it's becoming far more part of the mainstream. We've got a generation that's growing that absolutely, they're on the streets talking about it. But even 10 years ago, it was very much a sideline conversation. So I think you're absolutely right. Now is the time to totally support people who are speaking in authority in this way, because actually there's a growing collective consciousness that this is absolutely the time.
Awesome. There's a question here from Kathy, who's here with us tonight, I believe. She said, how do you create an environment where personal values are honoured in the workplace rather than left at the door in pursuit of the best outcome for the business and its corporate values? There's a bit more to that, but I think that captures the essence of it.
Well, you just have to live by those values every day and in every decision that you make. And I don't say that lightly, because that's not easy, and you make mistakes. So, and if I just talk about it from a business perspective, an organisational perspective, in terms of Wakatu, which we have 500 people across our organisation. 45 different nationalities, so lots of people, for them English is their second language. They don't necessarily share the same values as us. Although, for most people, at their heart, family, when we talk to people, family is often the first value that they will, or the first thing that is most important to them. Integrity is another one that people will often hear. So it's using, looking at everything through the lens of our values and consistently making those decisions, but surrounding yourself with leaders at all levels of an organisation who understand those values and we hold each other to account. So you can't leave them at the door, and it goes back to what Ali said earlier. Any business that has as its sole purpose to make money. And you have to make money, you have to be profitable to be able to do all the things we want to do. But if that's your purpose, you will be obsolete in very little time. So for us, our purpose is about enabling the well-being of our whānau, our families and our community. Very simple. So everything we do is aimed at that aspirational well-being.
No, and I would agree. It's about always treating people with respect. And I think that's what it comes down to, is the fact that at the end of the day, as we said before, we'll keep saying a business is not a thing of itself. It's actually a group of people. And so it's really about how that business demonstrates that respect to everybody at every single level, no matter what the role is of that individual within the organisation. It's very important. So it's about ensuring that people feel valued in that way.
We've got a question here from Donna McLeod, who's joining us from Motueka. Kia ora, Donna.
Kia ora, Donna.
Do you believe that you bring a difference to the table because you are a woman? Often you're sitting on boards where the majority are male, and is that the difference you bring? Is that part of it?
Looking right at me.
I am. Any of you?
I do think there's a difference between men and women. I do. I think that we do approach things often from quite a different mindset, and that's not a positive or a negative thing. That's just the way I guess we're programmed. We have quite different things that drive us. I think, talking for myself, and I think that often by the time, and this is going to be a really general comment now, so people might throw things at me, but I think often by the time a woman gets to the table to actually be involved in the decision making, she's already done a lot of decision making at home, getting to the point where she's actually sitting at the table. She hasn't just walked out of the door, focused on it from the minute she's woken up. There's all sorts of other input going on. But what that actually, I think, means is that by the time she gets there, she's incredibly well able to focus because she's very efficient with her time. Having said that, I do think that there's it's a 50-50 thing. We've got to work together and it's got to work. So I do think it's really important to have both genders represented at all times. That's, I guess, fundamentally what I believe. So I do think we just bring a different way in the way that we approach things. I think we just think differently. We use more words for a start. I've just demonstrated that.
Do you agree with that, Zoe? That you've got a different approach, and that immediately makes a difference in terms of having women at the table?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're agreeing?
Far more masculine than her approach.
Did you know that there was actually a study done at a council table where they were surveyed, the men and the women were surveyed about who speaks the most during meetings, and the women thought that they were the ones that spoke the most, and the men thought they didn't. And actually, at the end of this, I think it was a couple of meetings, it actually turned out that the men spoke 53% of the time or something, and the women were speaking less. So, fun little bit of trivia.
I'll use that. Thank you.
Yeah. It was quite interesting though, just how they thought they were speaking more, but they weren't.
And I mean, I guess Kerensa Wakatū has been on an incredible journey in terms of 40 years as a company now, and building this huge asset base and movement, I guess. And now you've got a significant presence from in senior leadership positions of women, and not just women, but women from whānau, Wakatū as well. What created that environment? How did you do that? How can more organisations and our leadership and councils and things encourage the same kind of progression?
I think the environment is very much, we talk about this a lot, there's a diversity of thought, and by that I mean women and men, but also I mean the kinds of thinking that is happening around the table. And one of our board members, he will be 80 in September, and he brings, as Zoe said, this diversity of thought to the table and experience that's irreplaceable, right through to the woman at the table, to the people, people from different backgrounds and experiences. So we have been having this conversation about what does diversity mean in all its different expressions, and how important it is to have that present in any organisation.
Because we need to, we've been talking a bit about, we've touched on it tonight with young people. I love what you said, Zoe, about you can't. Everyone else is still alive, and actually, it's not just about passing this off to young people. We all have to be involved in that decision making, but we also have to have a conversation about progression and succession as well. And I think particularly we know our councils do not have that diversity at the moment, and we know with businesses right now there are a lot of small to medium enterprises in particular in New Zealand, which is the backbone of our economy, haven't quite thought about what next. And through a huge kind of climate disruption and digital disruption, a lot of businesses are going to face challenges in the next sort of 5 to 10 years that are typically run by people who are older and who may not have created a succession plan. So across business and communities, how do we do that more effectively in the way we're seeing it work in Wakatū, right? Anyone can answer that.
I mean, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because a lot of businesses, because you're right, 95% of our businesses are small SMEs, and in Nelson that's employing 10 people or less. They're really small, often family-owned businesses. And people, one of the things that Tauihu suffers from is the fact we are so gorgeous. People come and live here for the lifestyle. They're not necessarily coming to live here, and they may set up a business to essentially be here in order to live the life they want to live. So it's not necessarily part of the thinking or the long-term thought of those organisations to do that. But I think the ones that are, I mean, if it comes back to leadership, it's about leaders actually realising that a strong leader is someone who identifies who the next leaders are and grows them and isn't fearful of that. Doesn't feel threatened by the fact that people are coming on to take over, because that's the whole intergenerational thing, and that's what has to happen. But it isn't always easy. When I have to say, one of the most wonderful things I've seen most recently are all of the marches against climate change, because actually seeing people, young people on the street marching, she said in a patronising way, but I think it's actually so important. It's something that I've really missed, is that actually having people being active and being out there. And I think that what that shows me is that there's a strong group of very strong leaders who are potentially coming through, which gives you great, it's very positive for the future, because these people are willing to go on the street and march. And that's a really important thing to do, to demonstrate in a democracy is vital. And I think it needs to happen more and more. We all need to get our docs on and march up to Fowler Street once a month.
And it comes back to what you're talking about around respect. You know, we have respect at the core, and I know Miriana talks a lot about this with the strategy, because everyone involved in buying into this process in terms of supporting what we're doing here has done so on trust, essentially. We're going to communities and saying, what do you want for the future? We're holding an event with young people and saying, what's your vision? And for everyone involved, there's some risk in that, actually. But Miriana always reflects on, if it starts with trust and good intent, then you can allow the process, you can trust the process, because it's good behind it. And I remember, Ali, I've never said this to you, but when I was on the youth council, and you were deputy mayor at the time, and just very simple things, which is youth councils can be an incredibly patronising place, and you came in one day and everyone was talking about youth, and you just sort of stopped the meeting and said, I just want to be clear on something, I'm never really sure. Do you want to be called youth, or are you just young people? And we went, thank you. Like, This is kind of this, like, you categorise it immediately. Yeah. You said you're just young people, and simple things like that can make.
I
such
hate
a
that
big
word youth. Sorry, it's something that really makes me twitch.
Or they're just people.
Yeah, exactly. They just have less years.
Yeah, and we have that with youth issues, right? Where often we put young people in a room. And we say, what do you want? And most of the time that conversation is driven very much so by what young people think we want to hear. And too often, we box young people into talking about graffiti and drug issues and all the things that we consider youth issues, rather than issues that we all share.
The richest community has got to be the one where actually all generations integrate across everything. That's got to be the one that's got to be the most solid in terms of how it moves forward, because you're learning and you're teaching at the same time, but from both directions. And that's, it's got to be the winner.
So it's a good question. One here from Johnny O'Donnell, I think. How do we encourage more intergenerational communities? There's been a lot of discussion about this in the workshops. We're saying our current system puts our mainstream system, if you like, puts elderly in rest homes, living away from the rest of the community. We don't often involve young people and children in these activities. How do we get back to that intergenerational living?
We were thinking about this yesterday, actually, because we had a workshop or a wānanga, and we brought together a whole collection of our employees, a selection from across the top of the south, and we were talking about how different would this day have been had we also asked them to bring their children to be part of what was really a strategic day. But when you have children in the room, when you're preparing strategic plans and visions, the conversation actually shifts pretty dramatically, because everybody is very conscious of this next generation, right there in the room with you. So that was one thing we were thinking about. How do you there's no rule to say you can't bring our elders, our children, into these so-called corporate spaces and have them be part of the conversation. So I think for us that's a natural way of thinking. But I think the interesting thing there is actually looking at some of our corporate practices, some of them that have been heavily influenced by American ways of thinking, in terms of what is best practice from a corporate perspective, and actually saying, well, actually we're New Zealanders, how are we going to design these processes and structures so they actually reflect who we are? So that's one way, perhaps.
And I think at the moment there's an opportunity with, there's a lot of discussion going on, but this is very Nelson-centric now, but around the CBD and what the CBD looks like. And I went to a workshop, and a lot of the discussion was around creating active spaces where you engage. So you could go and eat or drink, or you could watch a band play, but it was very much about active participation as opposed to just being in a space and creating spaces where everybody can just be comfortably and interact. So it's about making people visible within the community they live in, as opposed to, as you say, segmenting them off. And we had a really personal example, actually, with my father-in-law was in a rest home in town, which has now been demolished. And part of the rebuild, he used to sit with a number of other people in a lounge that was right on the street. And although these people, he didn't go out, but everybody waved and there was an interaction. Sometimes people would pop in. The new plan for that building put that lounge up on the first floor. So immediately, luckily, my husband was there to say, that's not a good idea. But actually, they may have still put it on the first floor, I don't know. But that just shows completely there's no thought behind that development. It's about optimising the space to make the most money to get what you can out of your business in a way that isn't a social enterprise. When I said all business is social enterprise, there are probably elements of that aren't. But I think that's the thinking that needs to happen to keep people engaged. And it was such a simple thing, but actually it would have been so detrimental for those people to immediately be elevated away from the world.
Awesome. I've got a question now that starts by being directed at you, Zoe, and then goes on to Ali and Kerensa. So it's from Mark Rawson, who's also here with us tonight. So Zoe, what do you see as the 2 or 3 key values you look for in a leader? And while you're having a think about that, the follow-on to that is Ali and Kerensa. What do you think the current, more mature leadership in positions of influence can learn from Zoe's generation?
Ooh.
Well done, Mark. Silence.
I think the 2 or 3 values that I look for in a leader and the things that I really respect as a young person is people that are okay with saying that didn't work. We're in a time of change at the moment, climate, economically, socially, how we do things. And I think the people that I really respect are the ones who question things and who say, why is it like this? How can we change it? And really look for workarounds. Not the whingers that say, oh, it's like this and blah, blah, blah. The ones that are looking at it and saying, how can we actually make that better? But then also when things don't go quite right, being able to say, that didn't work. How about we try that? So I guess the value from that is collaboration and communication are the 2 things that I really value. Collaborating with your community and trying to find solutions to problems, but also communicating when things don't go quite right, communicating what you're going to do, asking for advice. So I think it's, for me, leaders who interact with their communities.
Awesome.
Probably not to overcomplicate things. I think we find ourselves, and again, it's the structures that we have created, and I mean, it's interesting, it was talked about before, but I guess one of my biggest frustrations on council was being told that, oh, that's how we do it, that's the rule. And I would regularly say, it's not gravity, it's not this natural force, actually it's a man-made situation that can be unmade. And I think that for me, youth has a much clearer view of that, and the ability just to say it like it is, because we find ourselves often in social situations or corporate situations or professional situations where convention takes over. And I think that's what we have to get rid of and actually just remember what it was like to be 18 and actually think, that's a stupid thing. Why are we doing that? And actually think about it from another way. That's, I think, the best thing we can learn.
Yeah, I'd agree really with Ali. It's, I think for me, being around our young people, our rangatahi, it reminds me personally to try and always maintain a very open learning mindset. So we're always learning. There's just so much to learn, and actually the more you learn, the more you know. If you learn, then you hardly know anything. So that's really important, but also being held to account. Being reminded of and kept honest, really, because there's this real value of honesty I see coming through in Zoe's age, and I have my own daughter who's a bit younger than you, Zoe. She's 14, but incredibly honest and forthright in terms of the questions that are being asked of people who are in leadership, and like a very high expectation. So those are the influences for me.
Awesome. And a practical question now about a particular issue. from Gabriella. Thank you, Gabriella. Several questions in here. What is their stand on universal basic income?
Can I get a dictionary over here? I don't know what it means.
So, paying everyone a wage,
A
basically.
wage.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
Yeah, so I think the context that's missing from here is digital disruption is going to take away a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
And actually, it's going to require high-skilled jobs, but we won't necessarily be able to replace all the existing jobs. And that change is coming on stream pretty fast, and I think we're already feeling the impacts of that actually. So how do we create a system that supports people in that context and allows access to basics, and is one of the solutions, a universal basic income?
Well, I think fundamentally it's something we have to look after people. So however that manifests itself, I think there's no way you can leave people behind. So we've talked a bit about that through the strategy as it's been developed, but actually the worst thing in the world will be if you have this two streams running, where you've got one stream that's doing incredibly well and successfully because they get it and they get on board and they take advantage of it, and then you've got people who are left behind here. From a very practical social unrest perspective, I think that would be something we wouldn't want. But actually, just from a humane perspective, that's the last thing you want.
Yeah.
So there has to be a way to actually make sure everybody is taken along with you, whether that's a universal income or however that develops. But there has to be some mechanism whereby people are engaged and brought along. And I don't have the answer to that. I mean, right here and now. But I think it's something that we have to continue to think about and look at and see what social system and structures are in place in order to make sure that people are kept safe and brought along with it.
And also I think, how do you value work and contribution? Because I believe that every single one of us has value and has talent and skill. And because of all sorts of things, our kids in particular, that is not always identified and then nurtured. So how do we as a community achieve that so that everybody in our community loves what they're doing, whatever that is, and is making a contribution in whatever way that is manifesting itself. Yeah. So that's a sort of part of it. Purpose. Yeah.
Awesome. A question from Matt Patariki, who said, how would the panellists like to see Te Tauihu be a courageous leader on the national and international stage? So the answer was, yes, we see the opportunity for Te Tauihu to be a leader, but what does that mean and what?
I think we need to reprioritise. I think we need to screw the idea that disconnection makes us advanced. I think often of an example I heard while at one of Joni Tomset's Our Village sessions, and there was a speaker there, his name was Isaac. He had done this mental health awareness road trip, and he went from Canada down to Chile, I think. Anyway, he was sitting around the campfire and he's telling us about his road trip. And he's in Guatemala or somewhere really horrible. There's like no clean water, no one's got roofs, nothing like that. But he's in these people's house and is eating dinner with them, and they're asking him what he's doing there, like why he's biking, and he's telling them it's about mental health, and they said, what's that? They didn't know what depression is, they didn't know what anxiety is, and he asked them why, and the lady said, because I go outside and I hug this person every day, and I know this face, and I connect with that person, and this person over here I don't quite like, but we respect each other, we know each other. And I think that's something that here in Te Tauihu we're small enough to be able to do. I think, so connecting more is one, but I also really would like, in a couple of years when we all realise that we can't eat money and that concrete floors don't grow food, the world turns around and looks back at us because we were the smart ones that realised that actually we can't hide behind ignorance anymore, and we actually did something. So I think that's what I would like to see us do. Be a role model, be a bit of a pioneer. So.
I totally agree with all of that, obviously, but I think we can be a role model, because I have to say that this is one of the most interesting and exciting projects I've been involved in anything I've done. Wow. And I think that for me it's about the fact that actually the opportunities are endless with what we can get out of this, and the fact that we've got so many people who are all thinking and starting to align behind it means that we can you know, there are some, we can pick out individual things. We can say that we'll be carbon positive. We can say that we'll totally have a circular economy. You know, we can pick out those things. But actually, if what we get out of it is a community that totally all is engaged with it and understands it, and is a part of it, then that will be the most amazing thing, because that's the power that will make it the intergenerational attitude that we need to follow through. And I think that actually what we're seeing here is the beginning of thinking, because it's actually quite simple and powerful. It feels complex because there's lots of moving parts, but actually if you pare it back to what it really is, and you pare it back to the notion that actually we have to do the right thing, then it's actually quite a simple premise that you start from.
Kia ora. Kia ora, yeah. I agree. I think it's very simple. I think that the key to leadership, however, is that 10% of it is kind of the visible, inspirational, out there part, and 90% is just pure hard work. So it's about the capacity and the willingness to actually do the work and not shy away from that and be really committed to that. And most people will never see that part. They just see the,
Yeah, awesome. All right, we are out of time. It's a really, really good place to leave it. So thank you to everyone who submitted their questions and participated in this part of the panel discussion. And very much so, a huge thank you to the panellists for bringing that insight. It was a very inspiring conversation. And like we said, it's not hard running for it's not easy running for council. It's also not easy getting up in front of the lights and sharing your views on the live stream as well. So a big round of applause to all our panellists. Thank you.
Take yourself there.
Yep, you can. So just before we close, I'd like to invite two people up to share their big ideas for Te Tauihu. So this is something we've been doing as part of the process, is not only asking people to talk to us about things they want to see change and issues, but also to tell us what their big idea is and something they'd like us all to rally behind. So we have two, and we have room for a third if anyone's interested as well. We have two who have committed tonight, and the first one is Claire Keeling. Are you here, Claire? Hey.
Thanks, Johnny. Okay, small disclaimer, I hate public speaking, but I'm doing this for the environment. Hi. I'm here to share our vision for a climate-positive Nelson. So what does that mean? It's a Nelson where all businesses and individuals are measuring their carbon footprints, they're reducing their carbon footprints, and they're more than offsetting their carbon footprints, they're absorbing more emissions than they have emitted. So how do we do that? We do that by buying the local offsets that are grown in Te Tauihu. And that's our vision. We want a local demand for carbon offsets to be driving local supply. Now, when you think of carbon offset projects, some might be kind of, thinking nasty pine, clear felling projects. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about permanent native forests that are improving water quality, reducing soil erosion, and bringing biodiversity into the region. We want to prioritise these projects happening on marginal land, so not on fertile soil. So this is kind of the idea. Carbon footprint is established, but up until recently it's been something that's a bit reserved for the corporates. It was expensive, but we are ECOS, by the way, sorry. I'm representing ECOS today, and we're a social enterprise trying to make carbon footprint accessible for small to medium businesses, as well as individuals and households. So you measure your carbon footprint by we look at activities that you're doing in your business operations, and we assess how much greenhouse gas emissions that they are making. Then we can set targets for reductions, because it's going to be impossible to reduce our emissions by 40% by 2030 if we don't even know what those emissions are. We need to understand that. So we really want to create a movement, and we are calling this the Zero Carbon Now campaign. I'm going to be trying to drive this in Nelson. And we also have what we call the Nature Carbon Program. So we're going to be encouraging local landowners to get involved so that we have that symbiosis between carbon emission mitigation and resilience building. So and I just want to do a shout out because I didn't plan it this way, but Kernahan Engineering is actually in the room tonight, and they were the first Nelson business to go zero carbon with ECOS. And thank you. And I will do a shout out to Chia, because the Chia sisters who were here earlier, they're our first climate positive business. So we're really starting to talk to businesses about how they can be part of this movement. And there's so much that's been said tonight that I think just reflects that vision where we're all working together, and we're helping to build something great. So, yeah.
Awesome. Really clear. Nope. Right, and thank you, Claire. And now I want to hear from Joni Tomset.
Kia ora whānau. My name's Joni. I actually came up with this idea like 2 days ago when I thought, okay, what do I want to see in Te Tauihu in relation to courageous leadership? And the main thing that came to me was actually the fact that all of us in here are actually privileged because we are engaging with this process, and most of you familiar faces that I know are already in a position where you are engaging and you understand as well. So my big pitch idea is completely about the understanding and transparency of councils, community boards and youth councils. And what I mean by that is, and I know that some of these things have already been tried or done, but my blue skies thinking is that this could exist and actually be functional. And so what I would like to see is that meetings are recorded, but then also available on demand so that people can watch them, because council meetings are at times where normal people are working. Unless you're retired, then you don't actually get to engage with what's happening. You can read the agendas, but you may not actually know and you can't see and be there. Another thing is to have the agendas available in one website or one app, and then also have the key decisions made bullet pointed in a language that people actually understand. Yeah. In this website or app, I see that it would have a whole section on civic education. And I mean specific to actually this region. So the different voting systems, what they actually mean, the different governance levels. So what does the community board actually do? What are youth council doing? Another thing that I'd really like is for us to have this so that we can move away from printed media, so that we're not getting things delivered into our letterbox, which we don't read, we put in the fire pit. Instead, having it in a digital form so that we can share it and discuss it on our social platforms, and so that we can get people more engaged into what we're actually doing here. I'm Joni Tomset, and my big pitch idea is about getting people more engaged through providing them information. Kia ora.
And someone else has put their hand up, so I'd like to invite Marie to come and have a say.
Right. All right. Kia ora koto. Some of you may have known me. I've been here for 29 years, and I'm one of the founding organizers of the Multi-Ethnic Council, now Multicultural Council. It's gone from strength to strength, 25 years. It has always ups and downs as well, but hey, like any other organization. But what I've been preaching about, and I think the Tauihu will see all my contribution, is about we talk about engagement, we talk about connection, but my point, my vision here is really connecting the migrants and former refugees that we have here, talking about ethnic migrants. So it's about respecting and honoring bicultural, but thinking and acting multicultural. Look around you, we're growing, we're coming here. And soon enough, and I've just been to the Earth Hub launch, and there's already a talk there of that different set of refugees coming, the climate refugees. So, and these are from the Pacific Island nations if we don't act. So really, if you're talking about engaging, have us in your conversation. Think about this. We are at the ground and the cold face of the workforce. We get all sorts, but how can you give at an equal footing in a way in your conversation, in your thinking, in your blue sky thinking, in everything. We may not be your main partnership, it's always be bicultural, but have us in that thought, because we are good workers, we are there, and we help thrive this economy. So multicultural thinking and acting, and it's about ethnic migrants and former refugees. Thank you.
Okay, now I'd like to invite Paul, apparently.
Kia ora koutou, everyone. My name's Paul Morgan. I'm the chairman of the steering committee and chairman of Wakatu. And I just wanted to respond to you, Maria. We've been having a discourse on social media, and the immigrant population, our refugee population, we are working out how we're going to have that conversation. I had the good opportunity last year to host 9 Myanmar, mainly Chinese Chin ethnic group out of Myanmar. Actually, the New Zealand ambassador to Myanmar is one Steve Marshall, ex-chairman of Wakatu. And we had a very emotional day with that community in Nelson here. The leaders that came into my office, they were discussing their future. One of them had just last February signed the last of the peace agreements with the Myanmar government. 4 men in the room had standing armies with land-to-service missiles, and basically had come out of 60 years of civil war. Through that process that day, we're talking about their future, how they could enter into autonomous arrangements in their community, find a way for peace and prosperity, and to grow as a people and take their resources back. We got the opportunity that night to be hosted by the Myanmar community, and there was 300 of us in the church. It was a very emotional, beautiful evening with that ethnic community, and to share the richness of their story, the impacts on them as a people, and now they live here. And for us, as has been said, we've got 45 plus ethnicities working for Wakatu. There's a diversity of culture, of language, of knowledge and connection to many, many places in the world. And it's offering a richness to you. We only see that through our food and cuisine and what that's got to offer. So part of the discussion in the community is that we're undervaluing the connection of those people with a very big world and how they integrate into ourselves as a people. And for business, it's very important that we have a perspective that allows them into our world and that they can participate and grow with their employment. So I thought I'd just share a few comments with you because I've had the opportunity to host the Vietnamese community into my own home as part of the Alto program. And that's enriched my life, It's a very, very enjoying process. What I want to say to the women tonight, Zoe, you're magic. I love young women and their passion and directness. And to Ali and to Kerensa, thank you very much for your wonderful contribution to what I've found is a very enjoyable evening. It's great to see you here, Auntie. Listening to the Kororoi, our auntie here is 90. So, the elements that are coming out of this conversation, we're hearing from the mainstream population that we are disconnecting as generations. Everywhere we've gone across to Tauihu, there is a concern that we're disconnecting. And we need to think about that. In the Māori community, with the program that we have in Wakatu, we're multi-generational. It's a huge part of our discussion. When we isolate generations and communities from one another, it has social consequences. So it's something for us all to think about, because it goes down basically to town planning, district planning, long-term planning, how we allow people to coexist and engage with one another. And if you put a fence around your home, I was brought up, there's no fences on my street. I went into every house and knew all the community. And I ate their toast and all the rest of it. We knew one another. You know that. Well, everyone of my age, that's what we did. Current generations, councils love fences. You know, we've got to rethink the way we're doing things. So thank you all. I've really enjoyed tonight. First time I've stood up amongst us as we've moved around, but I was enthused by the fantastic contribution in Johnny. I'm enjoying his facilitation of the discussion. It's fantastic. And I'll hand the mic back.
Beautiful. I don't have much to add to that because I think you've perfectly summarised the evening, except to say a huge thank you to everyone for coming along tonight, because your participation in all of these events and all of the activities we have going is very, very important. So, who would like to close? Barney? I'll get you to go on the mic, so we've got it for the live stream as well. Kia ora.
Ka pai, kia ora. Ai tautoko tō mihi a Paul, Ruby, Raua, Judy, tēnā korua, te mārei kura, tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou o tō whakaro aroha tō whiti kōrero ki tēnei pō. Anō reira kei te mihi. E te kai taki e te waka, Johnny, tēnā koe, e hoa, e tō miri, ki te kaupapa ki tēnei pō, anō reira kei te mihi. Koutou katoa tū hono, whakakotahitanga kei Wainanui o tātou. Thank you all for coming to tonight. We all have a responsibility. And my responsibility is to have karakia to finish us off for tonight. So, nō reira, tēnā koutou. E tō mātou matanui te rangi, e te atua kaharawa, whakarongo mai ki a mātou, ho mai tō wairua, e te manaakitanga. Whakawhitai ki a koe, e tō manaakitanga, e te tangata mauiwi, e te whānau pani, I raro e te korowai te rangi Māori e, ake, amene. Po Māori e.